I always thought my biggest problem was deciding what to do after graduation. I had no idea that a simple plastic tube and a bit of saliva were about to incinerate 2 decades of my life. My name is Lily Rose, and I'm about to tell you how a $99 DNA kit turned my father into a stranger and my family into a lie. The box sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally opened it. It was supposed to be a joke, a fun little project to see if my love for spicy food really did come from some distant ancestor. My dad, the man who raised me alone since I was 3, laughed when I bought it. He even teased me, saying I'd probably find out I was related to royalty. Looking back, that laugh was too loud. It was brittle. I grew up in a house filled with soft light and old books. My dad was my hero. He was the one who braided my hair, taught me how to drive, and stayed up late helping me with my statistics homework. He told me my mother had passed away in a car accident when I was a toddler, a tragedy that left us as a duo against the world. I never questioned him. Why would I? Every photo on the mantelpiece showed a man who adored his daughter. The email notification arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining, one of those gray, heavy days where the sky feels like it's pressing down on your shoulders. I clicked the link, expecting a pie chart of percentages and regions. Instead, I got a high-confidence match for a father. It wasn't him. The name on the screen was Thomas Vance. My dad's name is Robert. I refreshed the page. I checked the ID numbers. My heart started thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the shared DNA column, 49.9%, a biological parent. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, staring at a stranger's name, while my entire identity started to dissolve. If Robert wasn't my father, then who was he? And more importantly, whose daughter was I? I grabbed my keys. I didn't call. I didn't text. I drove straight to the house I grew up in, the results printed out and shaking in my hand. When I walked through the front door, the smell of cinnamon and old wood hit me, and for a second, I felt like a little girl again.
But then I saw him sitting in his armchair, reading the paper.
"Dad?" My voice cracked. He looked up, smiling. But the second his eyes hit the paper in my hand, that smile didn't just fade, it vanished. It was like watching a mask fall off a statue. "Lily," he whispered. His face went pale, a ghostly white that made the veins in his forehead stand out. "I thought we had more time." "Time for what?" I screamed, the paper crumpling in my grip. "Who is Thomas Vance? And why does this test say I've lived 20 years with a man I'm not even related to?" He didn't move. He didn't even try to deny it. He just closed his eyes and leaned his head back. "I didn't adopt you through a lawyer, Lily. I took you to save you." The room started spinning. My hero had just admitted to a kidnapping, or something close to it, and the world I knew was officially gone. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. My father, or the man I called my father, looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He reached out to touch my arm, but I flinched, pulling back as if his skin were made of ice. The air in the living room felt thin. I watched him, waiting for a lie, waiting for him to tell me the DNA test was a glitch, a mistake, a prank. But he just kept staring at the floor, his hands trembling against the fabric of his chair. "Lily Rose," he started, his voice a low, jagged rasp. "I know how this looks. I know the word you're thinking, kidnapping, theft, but you have to understand the state your mother was in." "My mother is dead," I snapped. "You told me she died in a crash. You showed me the cemetery. I showed you a headstone, Lily. I never showed you a death certificate." He finally looked up, and his eyes were swimming with a mix of guilt and a terrifying kind of love. "Your mother, she wasn't well. And Thomas Vance, the man on that screen, he wasn't a father. He was a shadow. He was a debt collector with a temper that left marks she couldn't hide." He stood up slowly, walking over to the old bookshelf. He pulled out a volume of poetry I'd seen 1,000 times, but he didn't open it to read. He reached behind the binding and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "20 years ago, I was your mother's neighbor. I heard the shouting. I saw her trying to hide you in the hallway while Thomas tore the house apart. One night, she came to my door. She didn't ask me to call the police. She knew Thomas had them in his pocket. She asked me to take you. She asked me to disappear. He handed me the envelope. Inside were photos of a car crash. They were handwritten notes. Scraps of paper where a woman, my biological mother, begged a neighbor to give her daughter a life that didn't involve hiding under beds. I changed my name. I moved us 3 states away. I created a past out of thin air, because it was the only way to keep you safe from the Vances. He whispered. I loved you so much, I became a ghost to make sure you could be a person. I looked at the notes, then back at the DNA results. If what he was saying was true, he hadn't stolen me, he had rescued me. But he had also built my entire life on a foundation of sand. Every birthday, every graduation, every I love you was wrapped in a lie that protected me, but also erased who I actually was. Where is she? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. If she didn't die in a crash, where is my mother? He hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a second betrayal. Thomas found out she helped you escape. Shortly after we left, she went missing. I never stopped looking, Lily. But in the world Thomas lives in, people stay missing if he wants them to.
By taking that DNA test, by putting my genetic code into a public database,
I hadn't just found a name. I had sent a signal. If Thomas Vance was the monster my father described, I hadn't just uncovered a secret. I had accidentally told a predator exactly where to find us.
the weight of his words felt like a physical blow. I looked at the man who had raised me, and for the first time,
I didn't see a protector. I saw a man who had been looking over his shoulder for 20 years. But the terror in my chest wasn't for the past. It was for the email I had received just an hour before driving here. I had been so focused on the DNA match itself that I hadn't looked at the other notifications in my inbox.
with shaking hands, I pulled my phone out. There it was.
A message through the DNA site's portal. Lily, is it really you? I've been looking for my daughter for a long time. We have so much to catch up on. I'm coming to see you. The sender was Thomas Vance. He found me, I whispered, showing the screen to Robert. The color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. He didn't ask how or why. He knew how these databases worked. The relative finder feature was a roadmap for anyone looking to bridge a gap. My father grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight, almost painful. Lily, listen to me. We don't have days. We might not even have hours. If Thomas is reaching out, he's already tracked the IP or the registration info. He has resources, he has people. I'm calling the police, I said, my thumb hovering over the keypad. And tell them what? Robert's voice was sharp. That a man is trying to contact his biological daughter? To them, I'm the criminal. I'm the one who took a child across state lines without a legal adoption. If you call them, I go to prison, and you get handed right back to the legal father you're trying to avoid.
He was right. The law didn't care about the bruises my mother hid 20 years ago. The law cared about paperwork, and we had none.
We spent the next hour in a frantic blur. Robert began pulling floorboards up in the hallway, revealing a small safe I never knew existed. Inside were stacks of cash and 2 passports with names I didn't recognize. This wasn't a home, it was a transition point. He had been ready to run since the day he took me. We leave tonight, he said. We go to the cabin in the north. It's not in my name. He won't find us there. But as I helped him pack, a thought began to poison my mind. Why was he so scared? Was he protecting me from a monster? Or was he protecting himself from the consequences of what he did? I looked at the photo of my mother on the mantel. If she was truly missing and Thomas was a debt collector, why was Robert the one with the hidden safe and the fake identities? Just as we were heading for the door, a dark SUV pulled into the gravel driveway. The headlights cut through the evening gloom, shining directly into our living room like 2 accusing eyes. The engine cut out. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Robert pushed me toward the back kitchen door. Run to the woods, Lily. Don't look back. Go to the old ranger station. I'll find you. I'm not leaving you, I cried. Go, he hissed. I stepped out into the cold night air, the grass damp against my shoes. I crouched behind the garden shed, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it. I watched as a tall man in a tailored coat stepped out of the SUV. He didn't look like a thug or a monster. He looked like a businessman. He looked like me. He didn't knock. He just stood at the edge of the porch and called out into the dark. Robert, I know you're in there, and I know she's here too. I just want what belongs to me. I stayed low, my breath hitching in my throat as I watched from the shadows of the shed. The man, Thomas Vance, didn't look like the villain from a horror story. He looked polished, calm, and terrifyingly certain. Robert stepped out onto the porch. He didn't have a weapon, just his hands shoved deep into his pockets. For a moment, the two men stood there. 2 decades of secrets simmering between them. "She's not here, Thomas," Robert said, his voice steadier than I expected. "She moved out months ago. I don't know where she is." Thomas laughed, a dry, hollow sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Still lying, Robert. It was your greatest talent. It's how you convinced my wife to run away with a kind neighbor instead of facing the life she chose. But the DNA doesn't lie. My daughter is nearby. I can feel it." I leaned in closer, my mind reeling. The life she chose? She chose to survive, Robert countered. She chose to give Lily a chance. "Is that what you told her?" Thomas stepped into the light of the porch lamp. "Did you tell her how you waited until I was away on business to manipulate a woman struggling with postpartum depression? Did you tell her you weren't a savior, but a man obsessed with a family that wasn't his?" My head began to throb. The narrative was shifting, blurring into something ugly. I looked at Robert, waiting for him to shout to defend his honor, to call Thomas a liar. But he stayed silent. "I have the police reports from 20 years ago, Robert," Thomas continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Kidnapping, interference with custody. I didn't stop looking because I was a monster. I stopped because you vanished into a black hole with my child. But now the world is digital, and Lily Rose just turned the lights back on." I couldn't take it anymore. The confusion was worse than the fear. I stepped out from behind the shed, the wet grass squelching under my feet. Both men turned toward me. "Lily, go back," Robert shouted, taking a step toward me. "Stay where you are," I yelled, my voice cracking, but loud. I looked at Thomas. He was older, yes, but I saw my own eyes in his face. I saw the shape of my jaw. "If you're my father, if you really cared, where were you? Why did you let him take me?" Thomas looked at me, and for a split second his polished exterior cracked. There was genuine pain there, or at least a very good imitation of it. "I spent millions trying to find you, Lily. I never stopped. He took you from a crib while your mother was in the hospital getting the help she needed. He didn't save you. He stole you." I turned to Robert, the man who had cooked my meals, cheered at my games, and taught me statistics. "Is it true? Was she in a hospital? Did you just take me?" Robert's face broke. He sank onto the porch steps, burying his face in his hands. She was never going to get better as long as he was around Lily. He was controlling her, drugging her. I had to make a choice. I chose you. It was a confession. He hadn't rescued a child from a monster. He had made a unilateral decision to shatter a family because he thought he knew better. He had played God with my life. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. "Both of you. I don't know who is lying and who is telling a half-truth, but I'm done being a secret." Thomas smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Call them, Lily, but remember, if the police come, Robert goes to jail for the rest of his life. And I'm just a father finally reunited with his daughter. We can leave right now. We can fix this quietly." I looked from the hero who kidnapped me to the father who felt like a stranger. My entire life had been a script written by men who wanted to own me. "Neither of you gets to decide what happens next," I whispered. The sirens were a distant hum that grew into a deafening roar, blue and red lights bouncing off the trees like a fever dream. I stood in the middle of the driveway, the cold air biting at my skin, watching the two men who had spent 20 years carving out my identity to suit their own stories. When the officers arrived, the transition was clinical. Robert didn't fight. He stood up, crossed his wrists, and looked at me with a gaze so full of sorrow it almost made me want to scream for them to stop. Thomas, on the other hand, was all charm. He handed over identification, spoke in low, practiced tones to the sergeant, and tried to put a hand on my shoulder. I stepped away from both of them. The weeks that followed were a blur of courtrooms, depositions, and the cold, hard reality of statistics, the very subject I had studied. I learned that Robert had indeed taken me during a window of absolute chaos, convinced he was a savior. I also learned that Thomas wasn't the saint he claimed to be. He had a history of sealed lawsuits and aggressive business tactics that made my skin crawl. The DNA test hadn't just destroyed one family, it had exposed that I never really had one. I had been a trophy for one man's guilt and a missing piece for another man's ego. I moved out of my apartment. I changed my number. I took the small amount of money I had saved and moved to a town where nobody knew the name Lily Rose. I realized that my biological makeup, the 49.9% match, didn't dictate my soul. Robert taught me kindness, even if he taught it through a lie. Thomas gave me my face, even if he didn't give me a home. But I'm the one who has to live with the rest. I sat in a small cafe yesterday, looking at a new statistics textbook. I realized that life isn't about the variables you're born with. It's about how you calculate the path forward. I haven't visited Robert in prison yet. I haven't answered Thomas's letters. For the first time in 20 years, I'm not anyone's daughter. I'm just Lily. And for now, that is enough. Please tell me where and at what time you are watching this video in the comments below. End question. If you found out your entire childhood was a lie told to protect you, would you forgive the person who raised you? If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to LilyCalmStories for more deep dives into the secrets people keep.